Hello and welcome to Pricing College with your hosts Aidan Campbell
and Joanna Wells.
In a previous episode we had spoken about what a CEO should know about pricing. In this episode we're going to discuss really what a CFO, that's the financial officer, the chief financial officer in a business, should know about pricing, and to some extent what they should not do.
Yeah, look, I think it's a difficult one when you go on what should a CFO know, because sometimes the more they know about pricing, the less they are inclined to the less they understand it, because it does take a different type. You've got very finance driven pricing, which I think most CFOs are very comfortable with. By that I mean, that cost-based pricing. And as multiple industries move towards more value-based, dynamic pricing, and explaining that to CFOs, that becomes an issue because it's out of the realms of knowledge. It's new, and it takes a different kind of mindset, and it takes a huge amount of time and an effort to learn expertise in latest pricing strategy. And often, like CFOs don't have the time to learn. They've got their own areas and functions to look after. So then when they've got this new pricing team in their function, because it often is fit under finance, they're supposed to accept it. But often deep down, they never quite can understand and fathom what they're doing. And often this leads, year on year to that sort of tension, not a good tension. It's actually a tension that sort of separates and splinters the pricing team away from the finance team, and ultimately makes the CFO even more uncomfortable about what pricing is.
What I'll say is sometimes we think just because something is similar or it reminds us of our realm of expertise, we think we can do it. And pricing is one of those areas where everyone has an opinion, everyone has a view. But how often do you see your CFO having a very strong view on marketing or a very strong view on sales? To be honest, from my experience, it's not that frequent. But they often want to have a view, and sometimes are the person completely in responsibility for pricing. The reality is, if you are pricing but you're not involved in sales or marketing at all, that is a red flag for me. That really is a warning signal. Those three departments have to be working together, and if they're not, well, clearly there's something going wrong or going amiss. When a CFO has a job of great responsibility, they have very many things to be doing, and pricing if it's not their expertise, if it's not something they're focusing on, they should be aware of it, certainly, and this is something we'll talk about in future episodes, whereby senior leaders in the business should be having regular meetings with the pricing, whoever the person in charge of pricing is. They should be having regular meetings, be aware of stuff, be supporting it, be championing it in the business and supporting it. But we've seen many examples where every pricing decision has to be signed off, every discount at every line has to be signed off by a CFO. But that CFO they're not talking to the sales team, they're not really aware of the drivers, what the customer drivers are, what's really happening out there in the meetings, in the negotiations, on the websites, etc. And so they're really just looking at it from a cost plus perspective, and they have this viewpoint that lasts. And again, this is generalization, but often bear with me. In many regards, they're looking at the margins they made last year. They might have a strategic idea of boosting margins or maintaining margins, and that often is what is driving them at the back of their mind. That's perfectly fine, but the reality of it is that has got nothing to do with the old saying that in war, your objectives and reality, they hit each other very quickly, and you have to make plans on the foot. So the reality of it is when you're in a sales environment, things can change very quickly. When you put together your budget last quarter or last year, and then you're in the market today, it's completely different. Let's be honest, this is 2020. We're in the COVID scenario. Things have changed to such an extent that the budgets that were put in place and the CFO probably is trying to still maintain do they have any validity whatsoever?
Look, no, probably not. And this is why a lot of companies are coming, to us, because they know the markets have changed dramatically. They know that they have to reconnect with their customers, start understanding consumption patterns, understanding the causal drivers of purchasing decisions, understand what customers value and what different customer groups value, and therefore to reset their price levels and refine, optimize their price setting process, not simply think about price ladders in terms of cost base and a bit of value add at top, but really think about, how customers are buying, what they're buying, why they're buying, and really to integrate value within their price setting. Now, as I talk there, I'm thinking, how many different type of disciplines have I just touched upon when I'm describing customer-focused pricing? So yeah, we've got finance in there. We've got maths, science, because we're doing this scientifically. We've got psychology. We've got marketing. Huge value-based pricing ranges. And when you start saying that, it becomes a daunting prospect. And no wonder it takes good 10, 15 years to really grasp that, and also a mindset. And this is why you trust that pricing executive in your business to give you those options, because you know that they've thought through it properly, that they've used data, science and rigor. And ultimately, as a CFO, if you start asking your pricing executive to explain how they came up with it, you'll be bombarded with huge amounts of data and research and all this sort of stuff that what you really want to know, are they doing it correctly? Is it safe? Is it growing? Is it driving profitable and safe revenue growth? And are they achieving the outcomes that you want them to achieve? And if the answer is yes to that, then that's pretty good enough. If you're interested as a CFO to learn how they do it, then you know that you need to invest time in that area of expertise, because it takes time to understand. But this is also what a good pricing executive does. It builds organisational understanding of pricing. So as you work with your pricing executive, pricing team, you let them do what they're capable of, you'll start understanding the nuances of how they go about doing it. Not in the same way as they do, but you'll start getting it. And that's really the best way a CFO can work with and understand what real pricing's about.
I think I've got a couple of comments I'll make here. One of the things we see in many big companies is there's very limited delegation for decision making in a lot of corporates. There's controls at every turn. We're second guessing, and of course these things to prevent fraud and prevent incorrect decisions. But often it means that this person who's finally signing off on anything, whether a purchase or or a sale or a discount, can often be somebody so far removed from the decision making process that it's almost pointless. So that I've seen in businesses where CFOs have to sign off on even small purchases for items such as calculators and these sort of things. The reality of it is, I'll give two more points. If you thought about a company such as Apple, who we covered in the previous podcast, if the CFO of Apple was the person actually coming up with the price to sell a new product, a new electronic gadget at, you'd question that. You'd be thinking, have they done the market research? Have they really done the customer service analysis? Have they really dug into drivers? Have they really spoken to marketing and really understand where it stacks up? You'd ask those questions, and you'd also ask, shouldn't the CFO of Apple be doing something else? Don't they have a very responsible job anyway? So that's the first thing I'd say. And the second thing I would say is, in a company, the CFO could be a very talented person. They could have the complete ability to be the best pricer in the world. But the reality of it is take an American football example. If you're the quarterback, you could also be such a great athlete that you could be the best wide receiver in the world. The reality of it is you have to make a choice, and you cannot do both at the same time. You cannot throw the ball and catch it, at the same time. So the reality of it is once a company gets above a certain size, and in small companies, in startups, yes, the CFO perfectly well can do this role. But once you get to a certain size, we can't say this is a rule, but almost as there will be examples that will go against this rule. But I would say you almost certainly should have somebody in charge of pricing who's a trusted pricing manager, pricing expert, pricing dedicated person. And once that business, we're talking here above a certain number of $1 million of revenue, it becomes perfectly sensible. Obviously, startups, new businesses, all that sort of thing, the CFO can have that role at the beginning, but over time, you really have to recognize that the skill sets may align, but they don't always overlap perfectly.
I think that's right. I think after about 100 million revenue turnover, that's when you really need someone you need a dedicated pricing expert there managing things for you. I think we discussed this, the size of a pricing team in a previous podcast, so feel free to listen to that. But overall, over 100 million, you've got a lot of revenues to manage, more risk exposure. As a CFO, you can't be managing that as well as doing your own job and managing your own teams as well. You really need to trust that you've got an expert in the business doing it for you, and there's no shame in that. The best leaders are out there ensuring that they've got a great team behind them. Everyone quotes Richard Branson, but he's really the best example of that. He always hires people smarter than him in different areas, people that have got strengths he doesn't, to ensure that his business empire are successful, and also that he can pivot when they're not successful. So, I think to Aidan's point earlier, we've seen a lot of, I've seen a lot of CEOs, and not to mention CFOs, that end up being the pricing manager, whether they knew it or they were called the CFO, but they actually were doing pricing manager work. That's an enormous amount of work to be doing on top of actually running and managing your own business and getting the financial outcomes that you need. You need to really start thinking about organisational structure, what you need in your team to drive things forward from a pricing perspective. How much margin are you leaving on the table by doing things, the same old way, by not putting the right amount of dedicated resource to pricing, what you could potentially be earning with the right pricing support under you. And, and often all of these sort of changes come down to the point where you have to accept you're not the master at certain things, or indeed you are, but you need some help.
Yeah, it's the old Navy ship. Obviously, the captain of the ship is responsible for everything that goes on the boat, but you have to trust navigators, you have to trust other people, the mechanics, etc. And you have to use that expertise. So the reality, I suppose, the great leaders out there are people who recognise that they need other people, they can use other people's skills. There's that old saying that the great leaders surround themselves with people who are better at stuff than they are, and that makes them look good in the long term. When you see a leader who is so what's the word I'm looking for, but almost jealous of authority and keeping everything to themselves and secretive aspects, often that's what a business, there are other problems. But so I suppose we'll leave it at this. It's almost like a series of red flags. If the CFO is signing off on every pricing move, I think let's put a little red flag up there and let's come back and examine. Yeah, that's it for me today.
And likewise, look, again, feel free, there's big topics that we're covering. Not an easy place to start with, some difficult questions you may have, and you just need some extra information. We've got huge amounts of resources on our website on various pages, but if you just want to go straight to it, go to our resources page. Feel free to download guides on organisational design, managing change, understanding what pricing is, what is latest pricing strategy. All of these questions will be answered on our website on that page, so feel free, download. Thanks a lot.
Thanks again. Bye.